Welcome to the All Things Energy podcast. We are here to power up your understanding of the energy industry with some electrifying topics and some stellar guests. And speaking of stellar guests, I'm super excited to have my good friend and Lubbock peer, Gabe Vitela, who is owner of one of the, I'll say, most iconic Lubbock restaurants, One Guy from Italy's and Giorgio's. Gabe, welcome to the All Things Energy podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, listen, I know as we talk throughout this today, people are gonna start salivating kind of over these just amazing calzones that One Guy's is known for. And if you're not a Lubbock person, I hope this pulls you out to Lubbock and be like, I got to try these things. Yes. Because before I get into this, I'm going to ask just kind of an off-ball question. How many calzones do you think has been sold in the life of One Guy's history? Any idea?
You know, that's a great question.
I know. I'd be like, we've served 1 billion calzones.
Right. Yeah, no, we've talked about trying to quantify that. Of course, you know, when we took over all the systems they use were just old registers.
Sure,
and so there was just no way of looking back on that. So yeah, we
could run some back of the napkin of like,
right.
350 calzones a day times so many days, times of the year,
yes.
times what kind of dive, we'll dive into this in just a minute. Cause I get too excited too quickly. I love having someone like Gabe, who's an owner, a leader in our community, especially kind of running one of our kind of better, greater establishments. I like to kind of back up a little bit. Gabe, how did you get in the food and restaurant industry? Where did that get started?
Man, that started back, in the 90s.
Wow.
And so I started as a busboy. I had a buddy of mine that we worked together at a convenience store, and our pastor used to own it.
Yeah.
And so our pastor decided that he was gonna sell that. And my buddy, he goes, "Hey man, I'm gonna go work at On the Border." And I said, "What's On the Border?" He said, "It's a restaurant opening up, this year over off of Slide." And I said, "What are you going to do?" He's like, "I'm going to be a busboy." I said, "Well, what's that?"
Mm-hmm.
And so we go over there and we were part of the opening crew, and the bug bit me.
Yeah.
And so this was like the first time for like me and my family that we got to go to like a sit down restaurant.
Wow.
We'd never done that before. Right. And so this was like a totally new world for me. And so we were used to kind of like the fast casual or kind of fast food type restaurants. And so On the Border was our introduction to going in and being waited on and just kind of one of these.
They served chips and salsa?
Yes. And that was a big deal too. But these are the biggest chips we'd ever seen in
yes,
our lives.
They are huge.
Yeah.
They are so true.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I had a similar experience. My first sit down restaurant, I was elementary, and we had moved to Texas and went to a Mexican restaurant in Dallas. And it was the first time they had ever served what I now know to be complimentary chips and salsa.
Yes.
And I've always had a little bit of a financial bent in my brain. Even when I was a young kid, I'd kind of pick up on some financial stuff. So we're looking at the menu, getting ready to eat. Our family didn't have a lot of money, just how I grew up, but it was fine. And so we're sitting in a restaurant, so it's a big deal. And they put this chips and salsa. And look, my parents was like, "We didn't order this. Like, we're not paying for this." My dad's like, No, it's okay. They're free. They're complimentary. And my brain was like, "What? We don't have to pay for this? This is free?" And then literally I had this entrepreneurial idea, right? I was like, "Dad, Mom, let's just stare at the menu for like 25 minutes, gorge on the chips and salsa, 3 things of water, and our meal costs us nothing, and we walk out." And I'm like thinking, this is a brilliant idea. We eat for free. And my dad's like, "No, it doesn't work that way." Yes. But my first sit down was kind of a complimentary chips and salsa.
You're right. You know that was a strategy a lot of college students used in the 90s.
Did it really?
Yeah. on Sundays. I remember a lot of the dorms were closed, or at least the cafeterias were closed. And so they'd all come over to On the Border and eat chips and salsa and all waters, of course, and maybe order some flautes or something.
I know. That's right. That's right. We're all finding ways to try to save money.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Well, kind of give us, I know there's quite a bit of history to this, but kind of tell us, how did your path intersect with kind of the family of One Guy's, and then the opportunity to kind of carry the torch and take over the ownership with that location?
Yeah. So me and a friend of mine, Dr. Cupty, we opened up Twisted Root.
Yep.
And so we'd opened that up and it was going great. It was a wildly successful business and something that we both enjoyed. And he moved on and our agreement was I was going to buy him out.
Yep.
And so we reach out to the franchise, and the franchisor says, "Hey, that's great. You know, you're running the place. He doesn't have anything to do with the everyday running of it." And so he says, "We're good. Yeah, we're good with you buying him out." And so we had to sign some paperwork saying that we're releasing our ownership because we have to write a new contract with them now. And then when it was time for me to buy him out, the franchisor comes up to me and Johnny and goes, "Hey, just so y'all remember, we have the first right of refusal on anybody selling their equity." And so, of course, I'm naive. This is my first time owning a business, being a part of anything like this. And so I go, "What does this mean?" He says, "Well, this means you become partners with us." And I said, "But that's not why I got into this business. I got into the business to work for myself." And so anyway, this goes down and I become, in essence, an employee of Twisted Root. And I have a friend of mine that I used to work for, Gabby Gandor. A lot of folks know the Gandor family here in town. And so he used to have a shoe store called Gabriel's, and I worked for him years ago as a kid.
That was a great store with your name, right?
Yeah. And so anyway, he's got a brother that has a restaurant called It's Greek to Me.
Yeah.
And Sam has a heavy accent, and he was wanting to get some beer and wine on his menu. And so I tell Sam, I said, "Let me get with some of my vendors and I'll bring them over to your shop and we'll sit down and go over, you know, what they have to offer him, what you may want to pick up." So we go do that. And while I'm there, one of his other brothers, Joseph Gandor, he's in real estate.
Yes.
And so Joseph's telling me, "Hey, when you're done with my brother, I need to talk to you about something." And I said, "Okay, well, sure." So we get through with Sam. We go over the menu, what he wants to pick up for his beer and wine. And then I go sit down with Joe, and Joe says, "Gabe, I've got a business you need to look at." And I said, "Okay." And he goes, "What's this for?" He was like, "Well, for you to buy." And I said, "Oh, Joe, I'm not interested. I tell him what happened to me with Twisted Root, and I'm licking my wounds. This was only 2 weeks after this happened.
Yeah, no kidding.
And I'm just going, "Man, I'm just not interested, Joe. I'm just going to stay where I'm at and kind of move forward." He says, "Well, why don't you look at the business and see if maybe you know someone that might be interested?" And I said, "You know what, I'll do that." So I sit down with him. We start looking at the numbers, and it was a business that wasn't terribly busy, but it was putting money in the bank. And I came from burgers, which was, you know, beef and game meat that's you know, slim margins. And before that, I managed at Texas Land and Cattle. And so there in steak, you know, the margins are so slim.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this business going, "Man, they're putting some good money, you know, into the bank for what they're selling. What is this?" And so he goes, "I can't tell you. It's a confidential sale."
Oh man.
And so I was like, "Okay, well, I'll keep it in mind. I'll let somebody know, you know, if I can think of anybody." And I go home and I can't go to sleep that night. I'm going, "What business is this? You know, it's driving me nuts." So I get up in the morning, call Joe. I said, "Hey, Joe, I need to find out what this business is." He goes, "I already have the paperwork ready for you. Come in and sign it." So I come in and I sign and I look, and it's one guy from Italy.
Wow.
And I said, "Oh, wow. What's going on? Why are these guys selling?" I said, "The brothers want to retire.
Yeah.
They want to get out of
Lots
the business.
of calzones they've made in their lives.
That's right.
Need to enjoy a little non-calzone work.
That's right." And so then we just started working on purchasing the business, and of course I was going to take the money that I was going to put for my down payment to put toward buying one guy. And I was falling a little short there. So then I was breaking my head. Who do I go to borrow money from? And so I, of course, first thing is to ask my parents, and they're just like, "I'm sorry, we just don't have it," you know. And I go to different friends, and they same thing. We just can't, you know, we just don't have the funds right now. And I had a great buddy that wanted to help. He was in the process of selling his business, so he was just like, "I just can't do it right now." So I'm going, "Man, I guess maybe this isn't meant to be."
Yeah.
And so Joseph tells me, he goes, "Why don't you ask Sal if he'll loan you the difference?" And I was like, "You know, I've never done that. I don't know if that even makes sense."
Yep.
And so I'm at my wit's end. So then I go to him and I tell him, "Sal, you know, it's like your business is worth, you know, what you're asking for. I just don't have the money for the down payment. Is there any way that I could borrow the money from you, the difference?" And he was like, "What the hell kind of question is that?"
That's right.
You know, so my stomach's already turning because I didn't want to ask the question, right? And then he just like, no. I'm not going to give somebody my money to buy my business.
Yeah.
And I said, I understand. Well, then in this time process, there was another family that was interested in buying the business. And so they a couple of weeks go by and I get a phone call from Joe, and he's like, hey, Sal wants to visit with you. So we sit down and talk, and they're like, hey, there's this family that's interested in buying the business. They don't have restaurant experience. They want to know if you'd like to partner with them and do this. And I said, I really appreciate the opportunity, but I politely decline. I really need to do this by myself. Yep. I've done the partner thing. That didn't work very well for me.
Yep.
And so tell them that they're buying a great business, and I wish them good luck. And so, I left with my heart, hanging low. And so about a month goes by, and I get a phone call that Sal didn't feel right selling to these folks just because they didn't have experience. They also still owned the university location at that time. And so he decided to go ahead and work with me. And so then I'm excited, right? I'm just like, oh my God, this is going to happen. And so I tell the bank, hey, Sal said that he'll loan me the money. And the bank's like, that's great news. That lets us know that he's not selling a sinking ship.
Yep, that's right.
Lets us know that he still believes in their product. And we need you to tell Sal that you can't pay him back for 2 years. And I was going, what? I was like, what? Like, why didn't you guys tell me this up front?
Yeah.
Like that should have been part of the conversation, like from the beginning. So then I called Joe up and I said, hey, can you get a hold of Sal? He says, sure. So we get together and I tell Sal, I said, hey, so the bank's excited that you're willing to help me with the loan. And it was going to be in the form of just dropping the price. Yep. And so it wasn't a cash transaction. And so I told him, it's like, but they won't let me start paying you back for 2 years. He says, no, that's crazy. This is the stupidest. And there's blankety blanks.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And so I'm going, Lord, what's going on here? It's like I'm like emotionally, I'm just going, I don't think I'm meant to have this place. I don't think I'm meant to be a business owner anymore. I guess I need to look for something else because I feel like there's a roadblock every time. And it seems like when there's a little bit something else happens that caused me to go back. Yep. And so then, some time goes by and Sal reaches out to me and says, hey, let's get together, and says, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to loan you that money. We're going to discount the price. And how are you going to pay me back? And I said, well, the 2 years are going to accrue interest. So once those 2 years hit, I'm going to cut you a big check. And then after that, I'll pay you incrementally or monthly. Yep. And it'll be at the same pace that my loan with the bank is.
Yep.
He says, okay, that's fine. I'll do that. And so finally, and it's one of those things, growing up as a Christian, you always want to depend on God and you want to look for his guidance. And it seems like at least for me, whenever I hit a closed door or an obstacle, I immediately kind of want to read that as a sign from God that I shouldn't be going in that direction. And so what I've learned over time is that sometimes those obstacles are there for that he allows to be there to see if I really want it.
Yep.
And because many times in this process, I felt like I could have just quit. Yeah. And my friends would have been like, hey man, you tried hard.
That's right.
You did everything you could. And, it just didn't work out. And I could have left like feeling good about myself, just going, man, I tried my best and it didn't work out. And it was just a different time for me it was like one of the few times in my life that I felt like I really got to make this work no matter what. Yep. And the Lord blessed. You know?
Well, there's so many great things I love in that story and journey you've been on. It makes me think so often as we're kind of audiences are listening and different business owners, entrepreneurs, up and coming people. And there's something about the persistence, like you said, you're looking for different capital sources that would join you in the down payment. And, you have to go to multiple ones. It makes me think of countless stories. I was listening to the story of Howard Schultz, he wasn't the founder of Starbucks, but he effectively kind of took Starbucks from where it was to, the mega corporation we know it today. Yes. But in the very beginning, he was trying to buy Starbucks out in Seattle from the old guys who just kind of basically had a bean shop selling wholesale beans, not a real coffee experience like we know it today. He literally had to go to like 25 different rejections to find a partner because he was young and strapping and ready to sweat, didn't have the money to do it. Yeah. And, repeated rejections, and yet he felt conviction around what he was pursuing, kind of like you. And the spiritual application side to it, you've already studied. And I've said this a lot to other young people. often the path you're on isn't about a closed door. It's the right timing and alignment, right?
Yes.
The yes can be yes. We think yes is today, this second, this moment.
Right.
And if we don't see the yes today, this second, this moment, frustrated, angry, bitter, whatever it may be. But if you feel some conviction and vision, like you've stated, it may just be, the timing's just not there. And the timing may be tomorrow. Timing may be 3 months from now, maybe a year from now, because there's other things at work besides just us, right?
Right.
There's stuff going on south side. There's stuff going on the banking side. There's stuff going, it's just things you can't see are in this kind of formation stages that's not quite ready for the season of you to step into it.
That's right. That's exactly right. And, one of the things too, that I really want to explain to people too, especially being a minority and some of my peers, when the first bank I went to told me no.
Yeah.
I went to a good friend of mine. He reviews the business and he's going, man, this is a great business. We need to fund this for you. He turns to his boss and his boss was like, nope, we're not interested right now. And I'm crushed, right? Because I'm going, man, these guys, they look like me. They sound like me. And if they're going to say no to me, then surely the white guy's going to tell me no, know? And so I thank God sometimes that he puts blinders on our eyes and he doesn't allow us to see everything because through Twisted Root, I got to meet Charles Key.
Yeah.
And so I just met him and I thought he was just a banker, right?
Yep.
And so we had exchanged numbers and stuff and I go, man, these guys tell me no. I'm going to reach out to Charles and see what he says. So I call him up, and so he invites me into his office and he, I show him the business and he goes, Gabe, we'd love to help you with this. He goes, I don't work with businesses this small. I've got a great guy that I'm going to partner you with, Brian Murray, and he's going to help you out. And he says, Gabe, have you already got the down payment? And I says, yes, sir. I got that worked out with the owner. And he says, okay, what are you going to do for your working capital? And I said, I'm giving you all the money I have, Charles. I don't have anything else. And he says, you know what? We're gonna include a loan, for your working capital. It's going to be on a draw, so you only get accrue interest on what you pull. And this guy changed my life. Wow. He changed my life 100%. And it changed my perspective too, right? Because when sometimes when you come from the wrong side of the tracks, you're told all your life that everybody's out to get you.
Yes.
And that's just not the truth. And so I always want to first thank the Lord, and then I thank Charles for helping me out, and a couple of years later, I told Charles, I ran into him at an event and I said, Charles, you changed my life. And he goes, well, I'm glad that worked out. He goes, but that was all you. Yeah. And so I asked him, said, Charles, why did you do that? Why did you give me that loan? And so one of the things he told me was one time there was a Friday night, he and his wife went into Twisted Root, and I was working that night and I was closing it down. They were going in for a late movie. And so then the next day on Saturday, he shows up with his grandkids, because that was part of what they do was go grab a burger and then go over to the movies over at Alamo. And he saw me there and he says, Gabe, didn't you just close last night? And I said, yes, sir. And he goes, and you're opening this morning? I said, yeah, that's the hardest shift is closing Friday night, opening Saturday morning. But I do that so in case I ever have to ask my staff to do that they can't ever complain about it, because it's something that I did. Yep. Right there is, he referenced that situation. Yes. He goes, when you did that years ago, that let me know that this is a young man that I need to invest in.
That's great.
And for me, that changed my perspective on all of everything in life. Yes. I was going, man, people are always looking.
They're watching.
They're always looking. Yes.
That's right.
And that was one of the biggest. I couldn't put that on a resume. I couldn't put that on a business plan. Right.
No.
And
boy, that speaks so volumes. I was had the privilege of picking up Zig Ziglar, this kind of legendary, leadership speaker, success speaker at a conference. And he just shared some nuggets. And this is one of the things he shares publicly from the pulpit, but just a couple of young 20-somethings picking him up from the airport, taking him to the conference. And he just said, young man, let me just tell you, it's like, if you'll just pay attention to the preparation details of life, of just doing well by people, working hard. He said, I'm convinced success is the intersection of all of this preparation that you don't even know it's taking place, is when preparation intersects opportunity. You don't know when opportunity is going to come to you.
Right.
You don't know. You may think it's today. You may think it's tomorrow's. He goes, but for your story, the opportunity was sitting in front of a Charles Key, after Charles had witnessed the hours of sweating and leading and preparing yourself, unbeknownst to the public, unbeknownst to Charles. Right. And I think that is so much today's culture, we have these Instagram reels of success, and it's a facade. It's not reality. Or if it is reality, it's like Mark Cuban said, I'm a 20-year overnight success. I spent 20 years busting my rear, driving a car with the hole rusted out of the bottom, living with 6 guys in one bedroom apartment. Because life is about waking up every day, preparing, planting seeds in the ground, working hard, and then not knowing when that opportunity is going to intersect.
That's right.
But just being faithful in today.
That's exactly right.
And that's not preached. People don't put that on Instagram reels.
You're right. You're exactly right. I think it's Zig Ziglar. One of my favorite quotes of his is that if you can give enough people what they want, you can have what you want.
Yes.
I mean, gosh, that's having a servant's heart, right? And people just don't realize. They think in business it has to be greed. That greed is what drives. It's like, no, if you can get enough people what they want, you can have what you want.
That's right.
And it's so true.
That's huge. Well, I'll ask you this kind of in pivoting a little bit in the journey that you've been in is now leading, running restaurants. What would you say has been one of the bigger challenges that you've had to address as you've, lead and manage your team and now in a couple different locations and so forth?
I think one of our biggest challenges has probably been people.
Yeah.
Once the pandemic hit and a lot of folks stayed home, being paid to stay home, there was a lot of negative press on working in the restaurant industry. And there was just a lot of negative press about how we're underpaid and overworked. And so there was a big outflux of folks. And so when they started, some of these kids were young kids, in high school and college were their first job. Now they're wanting like higher paying jobs because they were getting paid more to stay home.
I know.
And so that caused this weird situation where they felt their value was tied to what the government had given them and not to like the value they brought to the market. And so that's one of the biggest hurdles, I think, is just our labor force. And then the other thing is like club sports. Before there's so much club sports now.
Year round.
Yeah.
Every weekend.
And so now you don't have young people that are working.
Yeah.
So these young people that's really affected our market. I'm competing with baseball, with soccer, with volleyball. And the problem there is that the job that I provide is the job that these young people need to miss up in, right? Yeah. They need to talk back to me so then I can let them go from this small job and then they learn, I don't talk like that to my manager or to my boss. And they're not getting that opportunity, and then they're getting a job at a CPA firm. And they're trying to tell the boss that I don't do Tuesdays, and it's like that's not how this works.
No,
that's not how this works. And so I think the rise of club sports has really affected our labor force in that a lot of young people aren't getting the experience that they need to have early on. They're not earning their keep, and then also it makes the child the center of attention, and it puts a lot of pressure on the kids too.
Pandering a lot to children rather than saying, hey, there's some work you got to do. You got to
sweat. Right. Yes. And then some of the side effects too is like, I remember seeing a friend, his kid was jumping on a trampoline and he twisted his ankle and he was furious. He's furious at him being a kid because of all the money they've invested in travel sports and going over here and all this coaching and all this stuff. And it's great and all, but man, realistically, is he going to be a baseball player later on? It's like his childhood. I mean, it's almost like he has a job now too.
Yes.
But his value, it's hard to show, right?
Yep.
And as opposed to like a paycheck, I'm thankful for the way my parents raised us. We didn't have a lot, but when I went to get a job, my mom was like, "You give us your check because your dad, when he gets his check, he doesn't go spend half of it and then bring what's left over."
Yep.
He gets it home to the house, and then he gets a piece, and you're going to do the same thing.
That's good.
And so that helped me growing up. I had no trouble with me and my wife. We don't talk about like who's buying groceries or who's paying for the refrigerator repair or new tires for the car, right? Because everything comes to the household, and so I think we're robbing a lot of children of that ability, and we're robbing them of a lot of the social aspect of learning to earn your keep and the value that you bring to society.
Yeah, I hope as we get further away from this kind of COVID distorted world we lived in for really a few years.
Yes.
I'm hoping that some of the lessons and the values begin to kind of return in terms of, all right, let's maybe forget that we were incentivized to stay at home. And the real incentive in life is to go work, is to go serve underneath someone. So, man, I hope that's not a permanent change. I hope there's a revisit back to those same values. So I'll ask you this. What role do you think kind of local business, because you're, local ownership, local business kind of plays in fostering senses of community? How does that play in your kind of operations and your vision?
I feel so blessed, Josh. I didn't come from a lot, so I feel like I've just been given so much. And because of that, I think us as business owners, when we ask the community to eat local, to shop local, that we have a responsibility to make our city a better place to be, not just because we're paid for that, but because that's what good stewardship is, right?
That's right. Yep.
Is I want to know that Lubbock's better because I was here, because I owned a business here. And so we do try to give back as much as possible. We try to find opportunities to give back. And, one of my prayers this year's been a tough year for restaurants. And one of my prayers is that we remain a generous family.
Yeah.
Regardless of what's happening in the economy, that the Lord would keep providing these opportunities to be generous and to share with others, because I remember what it was like to not have anything.
Yep.
And so I think it's important for us to give back, and it doesn't always have to be monetarily either.
That's right.
That's one thing is our generation is hugely lacking in volunteerism.
Yeah.
And I serve on the Guadalupe Parkway Somerville Center Board, a great organization, and trying to get people to come out to East Lubbock to realize that there's great things happening there is tough, and we need to get more people involved, because that's how we have an impact in our community, is by sharing. There's studies done on children. I wasn't a big fan of magnet schools growing up. I didn't understand them, but then I read this study that said that kids from a lower socioeconomic situation, that if they can just have exposure to children that are from higher levels of education and wealth, that it helps them they do 30% better in life, just being exposed.
Just having vision.
Yes, yes. And that was something for me that I experienced that on the border. I go to On the Border, there's all these people asking me, hey, Gabe, are you going to go to college? And I was like, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, what are you going to do with your life? And I was like, I was hoping to maybe be a manager, here. And they're like, but what else? And I'm going like, why are you asking me all these questions? And I thought being a manager was where it was at, but then I hear them and their vision, and it made me go, man, why am I thinking so small?
Yes.
And so exposing these young people to people that are successful, that are movers and shakers, it helps them exponentially. And it's not just giving them money; it's just talking to them. It's letting them hear your story. It's letting them see you serve them. Because that's one thing too. It's like you grow up with not a lot, or as a minority, you think that you don't have a seat at the table. And a lot of times that's a self-imposed thought.
Yep.
It's the imposter, syndrome. And so when we're able to sit with these young people and teach them about work ethic, and when you shake a hand, you look at the person in the eye, and we say yes, sir, and we say no, ma'am, and we're respectable, right? We teach them that you respect people, even if they're not respectable, but because you're a respectable person, right? And that's something that gosh, in the neighborhood I grew up in, it was all about don't let somebody disrespect you, right? That was the biggest thing, was don't let them disrespect you. It's like, you know what? You respect people because you're a respectable person, right? And these are some of the things that we teach these young people over there, and I'd love for more people to get involved in that. And so I think as a business owner, I really want to honor God as much as I can with the time He's given me, not having to be in the stores. And so I do. I'm active with Guadalupe Parkway Somerville Centers. I've started serving on the Covenant Board, Texas Workforce Commission, the Downtown TIF, and so I really want to do as much as I can to have an impact in Lubbock, because I love it, because it's been a great city for me to raise a family, to have grown up in. And I think as business owners, if we all chose to try to just make an impact in our community, it could be huge. It could be huge. And we just not treat the city and the people as just a money-making golden goose that we maybe feed a little bit. We really should rally around our city. We've got a wonderful city.
Well, I think it's huge. And I think what you're speaking to is giving a greater vision. I mean, there's that passage that says, "My people perish for a lack of vision."
Yes.
And that is so true of like, what kind of vision or lack of vision are we sharing with our next generation? And as we give them vision for more, for opportunity to grow personally, professionally. And I think in introducing, you'd kind of mentioned just what comes from volunteering. We're a big part of the Lubbock Dream Center, a lot like the Guadalupe Center. And it's like what people get out of serving, the reward they get for serving alongside others. Like we have this big Second Serve Saturdays where a lot of people from all over the community come in. It's the first time they've ever done it. And the smile and the reward they get, and this, is greater than actually what they've served someone else. I mean, it's been huge that they can go serve families and young people and students and so forth. We love that. That's huge. But what they get out of it, the reward, the sense of accomplishment, the sense of just blessing, it's life changer.
You're exactly right. I think, a lot of folks that are in depression would serve them so well to go out and serve other people. Because when you think about other people and the problems that they have, and you're able to see that, gosh, you have so much gratitude. You start going, man, I know these shoes aren't brand new, but man, they've got a great sole on them. And I get to where I need to go. My problems get a little bit smaller. It's not the only thing I'm staring at. That's right. So it's huge. That's right. Well, I'll ask you this kind of question. The All Things Energy podcast. Energy is kind of becoming, unfortunately, a bigger line item on companies and budgets. And what are some of the challenges that you kind of face as a business owner as it relates to energy? I mean, is it just the sheer cost of it all, or does it feel like it's a growing piece of challenges? Josh, for us this summer, we felt the energy hit when we transferred over to ERCOT. Yep. And we felt it through the business in that we had less customers coming in because their bill had shot up so much, and there was so much unknown that when they would come in, we're going, hey, we haven't seen you in a while. And they're going, man, that first bill was so big. We didn't know what our budget was going to be for this month. So we were just holding on because we're going into summer. We don't know what to expect. And so that was something that was, I guess, an anomaly for us because we'd never seen that before, right? We'd never seen one of these commodities like this shoot up so much that it stopped some people from buying. And as a business, gosh, it was looking at our energy costs seem to have come down, but it's those surge charges or what is that called? Pass-through charges that are really eating our sack lunch. Yep. And one of the things that we've noticed ourselves was that we've experienced several surges at our business. Like just power surges? Power surges, yeah. And so it's burnt out one of my air conditioning units. It burnt it out 2 times. Oh my goodness. And so now something that I've never had to do in the past, I'm looking into to see how I can put in some kind of I don't know if it's a breaker into the business or what it is that can stop the surge from hitting because I can't plug my air conditioner into a regular outlet. It's like it's direct linked, and so there's no way to put like a disconnect on there for that. And so that's one of the problems that we've had is we've had 3 of them happen this summer. Well, it's been so interesting since we started Rise Energy, several years ago. I had no idea how we as a company could position ourselves, and going back to what we've talked at the very beginning, how do we serve community, customers, organizations, families, et cetera? And a lot more than I ever realized, energy would come into the play for families, customers, organizations. I've heard some nonprofits literally say this. Yes. We're facing cutting some programs where we're serving as a nonprofit or paying our energy increases, right? And I heard that. I was like, that's crazy town. And then to your point, as for a regular business where customers are having to juggle budgets on where they're going to spend besides just your own line item. And so, one thing I'll just say, I'm so proud of our team at Rise Energy is we've kind of have this fairly wide perspective on ways to come alongside customers. So someone like a one guy's to go, hey, why don't we come alongside you and look for some, low cost solutions that would limit, inhibit, or prevent some of those surge impacts. One of the other things that we're literally starting to roll out now, I've probably told you before, is offering to put on site, especially for commercial customers, these nice, attractive commercial batteries, backup batteries. So they serve as a backup power
in the event that you don't just have a surge, but literally a power failure, which I pray to God never happens. But in today's world, Gabe, I don't know.
Right.
I'm not fearful, but I'm like, I see this as a more common thing. And the Metroplexes, Houston, Dallas is seeing it. And in exchange for putting these batteries on site, which costs nothing for the customer, so zero cost, they literally are going to get paid several $1,000s a year. So like one guy would get a check for $2,000 a year, $4,000 a year for the next 10 years. Like you're looking at $20,000, $40,000, $60,000
wow.
paid to you. It's like, you're not, I mean, yes, you're still going to pay for some energy, but you get a check back. And then they kind of lock in a customer. Literally, they're going to look at the energy pricing and go, we're going to guarantee you the lowest cost of power for the next 10 years. And so this is a brand new energy solution that, as someone who's connected to the community, listening to these stories, I'm like, I have to get this word out because we've got to find some ways to solve these energy challenges.
So you're 100% right. That's amazing.
So, I mean, that's part of the reason why we kind of have these conversations, is to hear what's going on in the community. How are we impacting it? But also, how do we come alongside and really serve and help save? Because, it's frustrating. You don't want to think about energy. You want to be able to walk in, turn your stuff on, train your team, provide a good product, and go home.
That's right.
And more, this is becoming not a burden, but a heavier weight we have to carry.
That's right. That's exactly right. And that's something that, you're right, in the past we just didn't have to worry about. And it's
and there were lots of reasons to complain about LP&L, right? I'm not saying that's not, but to your point of perspective, it's like, gosh, that wasn't the worst thing in the world from what we're having to face some now.
Right.
So exactly that whole perspective of my problem today versus yesterday. So, yes. All right, we're going to close with kind of what we call our lightning round. So I'm just going to ask a question. First thing that kind of hits your brain, spit it out. And so question is, what's your go-to pizza topping? Pepperoni. Yeah. All right. And what is the top selling item at One Guys?
The calzone.
The traditional calzone. That's right. What do you think is the biggest misconception about running a restaurant? What do people say? Oh man,
that it's easy. That it's easy.
It's easy.
I see so many people come in from other industries to open up restaurants, and I didn't finish college, and I think there's a lot of folks in it that didn't, and I think there's this misconception that it's easy work, and it's hard. Yeah. It is hard, and there's so many ways to get
20 hours a week, right?
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
That's the 20 hours a week is before you're actually open or after you're open. Yeah, that's not the opening hours.
20 hours a week of sleep.
Sleep. Oh man, that's about. Right. What about pineapple on pizza? Yes or no?
Yes, I'm not a fan, but we have such great customers that love it.
Yes,
and yeah, no, I'm just not a fan of salty and and sweet. I love my savories, but yeah.
What is like the craziest topping or what a customer wants? Who's just like, wow, yes, we can do that, but man, that's outside the box for me.
It was anchovies, pineapple, and capers. And I just thought that was like really, really salty because the anchovies are real salty. Capers are salty. And then the pineapple, and they said that it just evened it out. But
there you go.
That was just wild.
To each his own, right?
Right, that's
to each his own. All right. And last question, and this kind of gets a little introspective, is like, what would Gabe Vitela tell his 24-year-old self? What advice would you give your 24-year-old self? Rewind the clock a little bit.
Gosh, I would tell myself to have bought a house earlier, to start investing in property earlier, and not so much work on myself more than my job.
Yeah.
And I think just investing in myself as far as reading, growing up in a family that didn't have a lot, my mom told us there's not any shame in being poor, but there's shame in being ignorant.
Oh, that's good.
And so we were readers, and I wish I would have taken that a little bit more seriously. Early on. I just thought that was a way for her to keep us occupied, but man, that's changed my life.
Yes.
Listen to Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, these guys that it's like, I didn't have anybody in my family that owned businesses, but I could listen to people that did, the people that were doing it and reading the books. It helped me conquer a lot of the fear of taking those steps.
Well, that's fantastic. And I feel like what was spoken today, what you're able to share today is literally a deposit into other people that need to hear those things, need to be educated, not be ignorant. So Gabe Vitela, thank you so much for joining us on the All Things Energy podcast. This has been a really, really highlight. So thanks for joining us. If you want to find out more about what you can do to save on energy, get access to these free commercial batteries, check us out at getriseenergy.com, our Instagram, Facebook at GetRiseEnergy. Until the next time, keep making a difference, serve a lot of people, and we'll see you around.